What is an allowance in a construction contract? By the end of this video, I am going to be able to guide you through of what the purpose is and understanding an allowance. You're going to understand how to manage allowances in your contract and how beneficial they can be to your construction project. Now, have you ever wondered what an allowance is? Or how do I manage an allowance? Well, an allowance is going to allow you the opportunity to be able to input scopes of work into the contract in a way that can help you manage the budget and the financial aspect or impact that that scope of work is going to have. So what it means is that we don't know how much it's going to cost to do this scope of work. We do really like this scope of work and we hope that we can fit it into what it is that we want to do. But just in case, we're going to save a certain pot of money for this certain scope of work, and then we're going to be able to add it in as we can see that our budget will allow. There's many different types of allowances that we would have. Sometimes we might have allowances for hardware, or we might have a certain bucket of money available to us for lighting and how extravagant or how cost effective we need to make sure that that lighting is. We could have allowances for doors that we have for a project. We can also have allowances for unforeseen conditions or things that we don't know what we'll run into. I remember one time a project that I was working on and we knew we were going to have dry rot, but we did not know how much was going to be there. So by setting up an allowance, we could also have an identified unit price page that went with it, so that once we determined how much it was going to be per square foot, we also had a lump sum amount of what we had to use for that dry rot. And then if it exceeded that allowance, we had a confirmed negotiated unit price for each square foot after that we had to replace. So by being able to put these protections in place, we're able to protect our budget for the construction project. Sometimes the allowance that we have just isn't enough money. And so we have to be prepared to be able to adjust these allowances as necessary. Sometimes that might mean going back to our budget and value engineering and looking at other areas of our contract, or we may have to dig into our contingency a little bit in order to be able to ensure that we get the product that we want. Probably one of the hardest things to do is to explain allowances to the owner or our client. They believe that because this amount has been identified, that everything that they want to have done is going to fit within that amount. We have to be very realistic with the numbers that we put together in order to ensure that we have realistic expectations at the end of our project. So when we're developing an allowance and we want to make sure that the scope of work is detailed, that it's very clear, and that it is identified and shows the costs that go along with that specific scope of work. So if you ever want to save yourself from any of those surprises on a construction project, you can do so by allotting allowances in areas where you think something might happen, but you're just not sure. Make sure that you've defined the detail of that and that it is very clearly scoped out in what is going to fall within that particular allowance. We show you how to be able to manage these allowances in the curriculum and education developed for construction management online. So this is an opportunity for us to be able to have protections that have been put in place by the contract in order to keep your construction project moving successfully. So why wouldn't we put allowances in all of our contracts? Well, the reason is because this is an unknown and moving target. When we're putting in allowances, we're putting in allowances because we don't necessarily know everything that we need to know in order to establish exact cost or accurate cost for this particular scope of work. So another example that we might use is in the keying of hardware. So I know that a lot of owners like to be able to identify a single source for keying hardware because it's often that their maintenance crew knows how to key this specific type of hardware. They've already purchased all of the equipment for this type of hardware. But we don't necessarily know all of the different types of hardware that are going to be necessary to meet all of the different types of door openings and window openings that are going to be designed for this particular project. So by putting an allowance together, it provides us with a balance to be able to use as that bucket of money so that we can tip into it when we need to be able to purchase these items. This gives us some breathing room in being able to identify the scope of work while we're working. And so it's almost in a sense a design build opportunity to be able to continue the movement of your project, maintain your schedule, but then be able to have money socked aside that you know is going to be available when needed, when you finally identify everything that's necessary for this particular scope of work. So, how do I come up with an allowance? Do I just throw a number at it and hope that it sticks? Well, sometimes that's the way that it's done, but of course we're going to go through and identify a broad scope of work and then be able to put a budget or estimate to it. Now, we're not going to have some of the refined details that we would like, but we can have our current costs that are associated with this project. We can identify the materials, labor, and equipment that may be necessary for this specific scope of work. And we can start to identify all of the components of this particular allowance. When we do that, it also gives us an opportunity to be able to identify with clarity what scope is really necessary for this particular subject to be able to be moved forward. Is there other scope of work or other projects or tasks that are going to be impacted when we choose to go ahead and move forward with this particular allowance? So we need to be able to take in a master plan overview of everything that may be impacted should we move forward with this particular scope of work. I wonder, is there ever a time when an allowance would not be a good idea? Well, I would say that if you have a short project, your schedule is not offering a lot of time, if you have a very tight budget, then having an allowance is not going to be ideal. An allowance, again, is going to be providing a pot of money for an anticipated cost. When we don't know the scope of work and we don't know exactly what the cost is, then that puts us at a higher risk. So if you have a project that's tight on its deadline and has a very tight budget, having an allowance might not be the right choice. Allowances play a crucial role in the successful management of your project. In Construction Management Online, we provide education and mentorship where you can learn while you work and be able to understand how to implement tools like allowances in your construction management techniques. I look forward to working with you, and if you would like to go on that journey with me, please click below into Construction Management Online.